Most people think wealth starts at six figures. Some say it does not really count until you hit $1 million. That idea sounds motivating, but it is also deeply misleading. Because long before you reach those numbers, there is a much smaller milestone that quietly changes everything about how you think, feel, and behave around money. That number is $20,000. This is not just a financial benchmark. It is a psychological turning point. Before this point, money dominates your mental space. You are constantly doing math in your head. Can I afford this? What happens if something goes wrong? What if my car breaks down or my rent goes up? Even small purchases feel heavy because they are connected to fear. You are not thinking about growth or opportunity. You are thinking about survival. That is why so many people feel stressed about money, even when they earn a decent income. The problem is not income. It is the absence of a buffer. Without savings, your brain stays locked in a defensive mode. Every decision feels urgent. Every mistake feels dangerous. And when you live like that long enough, it becomes your default way of thinking. But something changes when you reach $20,000 in savings or investments. Not overnight, not magically, but noticeably. You stop checking your bank account with anxiety. You stop treating every expense like a potential disaster. You start making decisions with a little more calm and a little more confidence. That constant background stress begins to fade. This is where wealth building actually starts. Not because $20,000 makes you rich, but because it gives you breathing room. It gives your brain permission to think beyond the next paycheck. Instead of asking, how do I survive this month? You begin asking, how do I grow from here? That shift is everything. This is why the $20,000 milestone feels far more powerful than its size suggests. It breaks the paycheck-to-paycheck cycle. It moves you from reacting to money to directing it. It creates mental freedom. And mental freedom is the foundation of long-term wealth. And here is the key point. If you never cross this threshold, even a high income may not save you. People who skip this foundation often stay trapped in scarcity thinking for decades, no matter how much they earn. If this perspective is clicking for you, and you want to understand how these financial thresholds actually work step by step, comment the number 1 below to let me know you are watching closely and want to see the rest of this video. Continuing from that idea, this is where most people misunderstand why they feel stuck financially. They assume they are bad with money. They blame themselves for not budgeting hard enough or not being disciplined enough. But the reality is far less personal and far more structural. When you do not have savings, your brain is operating in survival mode, and survival mode is not designed for long-term thinking. In survival mode, your mind is focused on immediate threats. Rent is due. Bills are stacking up. One unexpected expense could derail everything. When your nervous system is under that kind of pressure, it prioritizes certainty over optimization. That is why people take the first job offer they get, even if it is underpaid or miserable. That is why they stay in toxic work environments longer than they should. That is why they avoid risk, even smart risk, because instability feels dangerous when you are already stretched thin. This is not laziness. It is not a lack of intelligence. It is biology. Scarcity shrinks your mental bandwidth. Your brain simply does not have the capacity to think creatively about investing, career strategy, or future opportunities when it is busy keeping you afloat. Long-term planning requires cognitive space, and survival mode eliminates that space entirely. This is why advice like, just invest early or think long-term often fails. It assumes a mental state that many people cannot access yet. You cannot plan for growth when your entire focus is on avoiding collapse. That is like trying to design a dream house while the foundation is on fire. Once you begin building an emergency fund, even a modest one, something important shifts. The constant pressure eases. You are no longer one problem away from panic. As that buffer grows to 3 to 6 months of living expenses, your brain starts to relax. You regain the ability to pause before reacting. You can think in options instead of ultimatums. At this stage, money stops being only about defense and starts becoming a tool. Its early value is not high returns or complex strategies. Its value is relief. Relief creates clarity. Clarity leads to better decisions, and better decisions compound just like money does. This is why reaching that first serious savings threshold matters so much. It pulls you out of survival mode and into strategic mode. From that point forward, you're no longer just trying to make it through the month. You're finally in a position to think about building something bigger. And once your brain makes that shift, the entire trajectory of your financial life begins to change. Once you are out of survival mode, something else quietly starts to happen. Momentum begins to build. And this is the part of wealth building that almost nobody explains clearly, which is why so many people give up right before things start working in their favor. Early on, building wealth feels brutally slow. You are saving consistently, making sacrifices, and doing everything right, yet the numbers barely seem to move. It feels like pushing a massive boulder uphill. Every step requires effort. Every dollar saved feels hard-won. Progress is so gradual that it is easy to believe nothing is happening at all. This is the stage where most people quit, not because they are incapable, but because the feedback is delayed. But once you cross that first major threshold, momentum changes the rules. Your money starts working alongside you, instead of waiting for you to do all the work. Compound growth begins to show up in ways you can actually see. The second 20,000 takes less time than the first. Even if you change nothing about your behavior, you are saving the same amount. You are taking the same level of risk. The difference is that you now have capital-producing results in the background. This is where wealth starts to feel less like constant effort and more like a system. Each milestone becomes easier than the last. At higher levels, the acceleration becomes almost shocking. What once took years can eventually happen in months, sometimes without additional effort. This is not luck. It is math unfolding over time. The most important lesson here is that wealth does not grow in a straight line. The beginning feels unfairly hard, while later stages feel almost too easy. If you only judge progress by how fast things move at the start, you will quit too early. If you understand that momentum takes time to build, persistence becomes logical instead of emotional. Here is a simple test. If this explanation just changed how you think about slow progress, tap the like button right now. Not later, right now. As momentum starts to work in your favor, it is easy to assume that something special has unlocked. Many people look at those who are building wealth faster and assume they must have access to secret investments, insider opportunities, or some hidden financial knowledge that regular people never get to see. That belief is comforting because it explains away the gap. But it is also wrong. In the early and middle stages of wealth building, the difference is not secrets, it is scale. The same investment behavior produces very different results depending on how much money is working. A percentage return sounds impressive or disappointing only because of the number it is applied to. 10% on a small amount barely registers. 10% on a larger base suddenly feels meaningful. This is why the $20,000 milestone feels so powerful. Before that point, your investment returns can feel almost invisible. You might earn a few $100s over an entire year and wonder if it is even worth the effort. After that point, the same market movement produces results you can feel. A return turns into a rent payment, a bonus month of savings, real progress that reinforces the behavior that created it. What is important to understand is that the strategy does not change. There is no magic fund that appears once you cross a line. You are using the same basic tools: broad market exposure, long-term discipline, consistent contributions. The only thing that changes is the size of the engine. This is why wealth building is far more accessible than most people believe. It does not require genius-level insight or perfect timing. It requires patience through the phase where returns feel boring and trust that scale will eventually do the heavy lifting. The people who appear to be moving faster are often just further along the same path. Once you understand this, comparison loses its power. Instead of asking what they know that you do not, the better question becomes, how long have they been letting scale work for them? And that realization can completely change how you approach your own timeline. Once you understand that scale, not secrets, is what drives real progress, another shift starts to take place. This one has nothing to do with numbers on a screen and everything to do with who you believe you are. Saving $20,000 does more than build wealth. It reshapes your identity. Think about what it actually takes to reach that point if you are starting from zero. You do not get there by accident. You get there by paying attention. You track where your money goes. You pause before spending. You say no to things you could afford in the moment, so you can say yes to something bigger later. And you do that not once, but over and over again for months or years. Along the way, something important happens. You stop seeing yourself as someone who is bad with money or always behind. You start seeing yourself as someone who can plan, commit, and follow through. That identity shift is more powerful than the dollars themselves. The money can be spent. The habit stays. This is why anxiety around small purchases fades. Before, every expense felt like a potential mistake. Now, you have proof that you can make real sacrifices when it matters. A coffee does not threaten your future because you already demonstrated discipline at a much higher level. Confidence replaces constant second-guessing. And this mindset does not stay confined to money. It spills into other areas of life. You become more patient, more intentional, more comfortable delaying gratification because you have seen the payoff. Goals that once felt overwhelming start to feel manageable, not because they are easier, but because you trust yourself to handle the process. This is not motivational talk. It is practical psychology. When you prove to yourself that you can act in your long-term interest, future goals stop feeling intimidating. They feel achievable. And once that belief is in place, progress becomes repeatable. At that point, wealth building is no longer something you hope will happen one day. It is something you know you are capable of building, step by step, on purpose. Once your identity shifts and you trust yourself to handle money with intention, the external world starts to feel different too. Not because life suddenly becomes easier, but because the way you experience problems changes. This is where financial security quietly turns stress into choice. When you are living without savings, every surprise feels like a threat. A car repair is not just inconvenient, it is destabilizing. A rent increase is not just annoying, it is terrifying. One unexpected bill can hijack an entire month and force you into damage control mode. In that state, you're not solving problems, you are reacting to them. But when you have real financial breathing room, those same events lose their power. A repair becomes an inconvenience instead of a crisis. A higher bill becomes something you adjust for, not something that defines you. You stop asking, "How do I survive this?" and start asking, "What is the best move here?" That shift is subtle, but it changes everything. More importantly, you begin to notice opportunities that were always there but previously out of reach. A friend mentions starting a business and looking for early support. Before, you would have nodded politely and moved on. Now you can actually evaluate whether it makes sense. A professional course or conference comes up that could improve your career trajectory. Before, the cost felt prohibitive. Now, you can weigh the potential return. A real estate deal appears that needs work and patience. Before, it was fantasy. Now, it is a calculation. This is what people really mean when they say money attracts money. It is not luck or favoritism, it is optionality. Capital gives you choices, choices give you leverage, and leverage creates more opportunities to grow. Wealth at this stage is not about luxury or status. It is about flexibility, the ability to say yes or no from a place of calm instead of fear, the ability to take a measured risk without betting your entire future on it, the ability to recover quickly when things do not go as planned. And here is where this compounds. Each good decision made from a position of stability increases your future stability. Each opportunity you can act on expands your range of options even further. Over time, this creates a widening gap between those who are constantly reacting and those who are designing their lives intentionally. This is why early savings matter so much. They do not just protect you from downside, they open the door to upside. And once you start seeing life through that lens, money stops being something you chase and starts becoming a tool you use deliberately. As financial flexibility grows and you stop reacting to every problem, your attention naturally shifts to something far more important. You stop obsessing over the small stuff and start focusing on the decisions that actually shape your future. This change may sound subtle, but it is one of the clearest signs that you have moved beyond survival thinking. When money is tight, every purchase feels loaded. A coffee becomes a debate. Groceries feel like a math problem. Small upgrades trigger guilt or anxiety because every dollar feels like it could be the one that tips everything over. Your brain treats minor expenses as if they carry the same weight as major financial decisions, because in a fragile situation, they sometimes do. But once you have a solid foundation, that mindset begins to loosen. You realize that many of these small choices barely move the needle over the long run. The difference between making coffee at home or buying it occasionally is not what determines whether you build wealth or not. Those details can matter, but they are not the main drivers. What truly matters are the big decisions: where you live, what you drive, how much of your income you keep instead of spend, how consistently you invest, whether you grow your skills and earning power over time. These choices can swing your financial trajectory by tens or even hundreds of thousands of dollars, and they deserve your attention far more than minor daily spending. This shift is deeply freeing. You stop micromanaging your life and start thinking strategically. Instead of constant self-denial, you practice intentional prioritization. You spend without guilt on things that align with your values, and you are disciplined where it counts. Money stops feeling like a constant restraint and starts feeling like a planning tool. Importantly, this is not about reckless spending or ignoring budgets. It is about understanding leverage. Some decisions carry far more weight than others. Financial maturity is recognizing which choices deserve careful thought and which ones do not. When you focus on the big levers, progress accelerates. You conserve mental energy, you reduce stress, and you make fewer emotional decisions because your attention is directed where it matters most. This is how people move from managing money day to day to shaping a long-term financial strategy. At this stage, money is no longer something you fight with constantly. It becomes something you organize, optimize, and use intentionally to support the life you want to build. When you put all of this together, the final shift becomes clear. Money does not just change how you spend. It changes how you show up at work and how much control you have over your own time and choices. This is where everything we have talked about comes full circle. Without savings, your job controls you. You need the paycheck, so you tolerate situations you should not. You avoid difficult conversations. You accept limits that are never explicitly stated, but always felt. That dependence quietly shapes your behavior and keeps you negotiating from a position of fear. Even talented, hardworking people stay stuck simply because they cannot afford to leave. But when you build real savings, especially around that $20,000 mark, the balance of power shifts. You gain what can be called walking away money. You may never use it, and that is the point. Knowing that you could walk away changes how you think, speak, and act. You set boundaries more clearly. You ask for what you are worth. You take on meaningful challenges without fear of immediate consequences. Ironically, this confidence often leads to better outcomes. Managers respond differently. Opportunities appear. Income grows faster, not because you worked harder, but because you operated from strength instead of desperation. This creates a reinforcing loop. More confidence leads to better results. Better results lead to more savings. More savings create even more freedom. This is why the $20,000 milestone should never be treated as a reward to spend. It is not a finish line. It is the foundation. Spending it for short-term pleasure resets the entire process. Protecting it allows everything else to compound. The real lesson here is simple. Wealth is not about luxury. It is about control. Control over your time, control over your decisions, control over your future. $20,000 will not make you rich, but it makes the path to wealth possible. If this video helped you see money differently, and you want to keep building this mindset, subscribe to the channel so you do not miss the next video. What you do next with this information can change everything.